All right, hello everybody. So thank you very much for taking the time to view this video lecture on perfecting the SWOT analysis. Now, even though this was the first component that you worked on in your deliverable, and you're now at the final stages of finishing your deliverable, this is still an important topic to discuss because your SWOT analysis should be something that you go back to continuously, that you're always working on and updating because companies and industries themselves are always changing. So it's important that you continue to revisit your SWOT analysis, and based off of submissions received this semester, I have some suggestions as to how to improve the process you do this, because these are incredibly important to fleshing out any issues or any aspects that are very positive for the company and that can be revisited in different parts of your deliverable. So first we're going to be discussing what is the SWOT analysis, why are we doing this, how it's important, and then going into some examples and any recommendations I have for you guys to make sure your SWOT analysis are clean, clear, and precise. So let's get started. So what is a SWOT analysis? Now, it's obviously strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. SWOT. However, based off of submissions, there seems to be some confusion relating as to what these specifically pertain to. So strengths and weaknesses refer to the company itself. Whichever company you selected for your cross-culture project will be referred to in these first two. So any positive examples and negative examples of instances, aspects, characteristics that are within your company. Opportunities and threats, however, relate only to the industry at large, so no mention of the company itself at this point. And this seems to be where people get confused. People believe that opportunities and threats are still something you talk about your company. Strengths and weaknesses, you're talking about the industry, this is the strength of this industry, and although this seems very intuitive, this is where we're seeing a bit of overlap. So the whole point of the SWOT analysis is to first look at the company with strengths and weaknesses, and then looking solely at the industry itself. And even though you might want to feel tempted to discuss how these opportunities will affect your company, this isn't the time and place to discuss the interrelations between them. That's for other parts of your paper. So you could always go back to another part of your paper and discuss perhaps in the pricing and financial aspect of your paper. It could be based off of the pricing, the average pricing of this industry. Our company fits within the model within this average and would thereby present itself as a valuable competitor within the industry. So there's opportunities to revisit this later and discuss these in a bit more detail. So when we look at why we're using this, the whole point is to use it as an engagement tool. If you're a consultant later on, or even if you're hired by a company and you're working on a project, the whole point is that you might not be familiar with these projects or these companies at first, and your SWOT analysis is your way of getting oriented with the company itself and then how it operates within an industry. So this helps to build a sense of understanding. And like I said, it can be adjusted over time. So even though you did a SWOT analysis at the beginning, as you're putting together your final deliverable, you might find not only the company and industry itself has changed, but how you understand the issue may as well be changed. So it's worth going back and double checking it. Now, providing an example as to why we do this. So I came across an example lately of Gucci versus Prada. Now, you might think that these are pretty similar in most regards, and for a large part they are. They operate within a luxury retail industry, and they're pretty much direct competitors in many regards. They have very similar products. However, based on the article, we see how Prada has actually been doing less well in comparison to Gucci. And why would this be? Because they're so similar. Well, the article below, you can always look at later, it mentions how Prada, for example, has been doing less well in Greater China. So even though they operate within a very similar industry, we're seeing how their performance is different, and this is going to go back to perhaps the strength of Gucci is that their marketing campaign is very successful in Greater China in comparison to Prada. So that could explain the difference between the two. So you could always flesh out more about the industry too. Perhaps if you did an industry analysis, look at opportunities and threats, you would see that perhaps the luxury brand industry has been performing less well in Greater China for 2017. And maybe we'll find that Gucci hasn't been using that as a target market, but Prada has. So there's very different reasons as to why company performances differ from each other, and it all begins with doing a SWOT analysis. So let's go into talking a bit more as to how we're going to actually do a SWOT analysis. So it's my recommendation that you always pick at least three strengths, 3 weaknesses, 3 opportunities, 3 threats. These are going to signify that you've done sufficient research and that you have an understanding of it. So you can do 3, 4, 5, but you should at least have 3. And they have to be listed and described why. Now, I've noticed with a lot of submissions that people were very good at pointing out strengths and weaknesses, but they're not really fleshing out as to why they're important in this particular instance. So if we go with strengths being the company focus, this is not an example pulled from submissions, but I've seen a lot of submissions that are very much structured like this. It'll be a one-liner, and it'll be the company workplace is multicultural. It'll be just something very simple like that, and it won't go into detail as to why it's considered a strength. It seems very intuitive when you see this example, the workplace is multicultural, and us as business students, what comes to mind automatically is, oh, we have very flexible employees, we have very understandable employees, we have ones that work very well in a team. But the reader who's looking at this, they might not have that same understanding as we have. So we have to communicate why it's important and not take that for granted. So a better way to say this would be going into more specific. So the company's hiring policy is targeted towards applicants who speak more than one language and have past travel experience. This demonstrates that they are willing and able to work across host countries and bring that knowledge back to the home country. So this example is considered better because it's more specific. We're talking about the company's hiring process. We're demonstrating the relationship that this has and implications it has with the company. So if we look at weaknesses, we're essentially doing the same thing, but we're now looking at negative aspects of the company. So this example was taken from a submission, and it says, can't operate in imperial unit countries, government certification, market entry, competition, hard to set apart product from other companies' products. So a lot of what I'm seeing is actually you're on the right track. You have the right ideas, but they're not being structured or communicated clearly. So just taking the first weakness, can't operate in imperial unit countries, if we're going to make that better, a better way to phrase it would be, based on the product design, the company is limited to countries that do not use the imperial unit, which would thereby limit the number of potential consumers. So just fleshing it out a little bit more as to why this is considered a weakness. And this can be done for government certification, market entry, competition, hard to set apart product from other companies' products. This can be done for all of these ones as well. But just keeping in mind that when you have aspects such as government certification, market entry, competition. These are very big picture, and you could pretty much use these examples for every company you get. There's always going to be issues with market entry and competition, getting certification, but you have to relate it back specifically to your company as to why it's a weakness. Maybe you have to, for your particular company, government certification will require a 7-year wait period, which would delay your ideal market entry time. Just going back specifically to the company, this is where you mention the company. But when we start to talk about opportunities and threats, this is where the company itself should not be mentioned. You've already discussed the positive and negative implications of operations and characteristics of your company. You've already done that. This is your chance to talk more about the industry and any positive and negative implications that the industry itself might have. So again, mentioning at least 3, listing and describing why, but changing focus. So this example here, under poor, was again selected from a submission. So the reason why I picked this is because we're seeing the confusion between the company and opportunity. So this part should be the industry has the opportunity. The company itself should not be mentioned. You either need to talk about the company and with regard to strengths and weaknesses, or the industry related to opportunities and threats, not mixing the two. Your chance to mix the two will come later on in other parts of your report where you can talk about the interrelationship. This is just getting the building blocks down so you can get to that point. So this example, with knowledge of the metering industry and millions installed in its hometown, Beater has the opportunity to access markets with increasing needs for its technology. A trend in this industry is the smart meter, which Beater developed a decade ago. Many consumers are busy, and smart meters precisely measure energy and water use and can link with Wi-Fi so people can see in real time on their phones. This, to me, sounds like it would better fit within strengths. So Beater has the strength to access markets. So this would fit better in a different category. But at the same time, it seems that they were actually on the right track and were trying to focus in on the industry, because the good example is actually a continuation of their submission. This was all part of the same submission, but this part specifically addresses the opportunities of the industry. When it mentions, additionally, many government policies in the new market can favor such technology because policies in countries adopt efficient energy usage as a means to sustain the company and demand for it as they develop into modern nations. So this relates to the big industry concepts at hand. There is no mention of the company, so this is a much better way to phrase it. So it would be better to keep in mind that the breakdown needs to be separate between company versus industry. So when we look at threats, again, making sure you have at least 3, list and describe why it's important, and keep it industry focused. So again, this example pulled from submissions shows a weakness of this industry. Now, when you want to phrase your threats, opportunities, whatever, you can directly say the blank of this industry, the blank of this company, but they need to have the right correlations. So you either want to talk about a weakness of this company or the threat of this industry if you choose to phrase it. You don't have to even phrase it if you're doing it in a bullet point format, but make sure that if you are phrasing it, the right pairings go together. Because this is actually a not bad example of a threat, because you see there are many competitors within this industry. Many can create products, can create similar products, and create contracts with those that require the item. So maybe going a bit more specific with this example in regards to the industry at hand, but this is not bad. So to make it better, however, it would be better to be even more specific. This market is highly saturated and is easy to enter, making it difficult for new competitors unless they enter based on product differentiation. So getting a bit more specific based on the research you've done. Now, the joy of this is that at the beginning you weren't really familiar with the company, But after working on this project for several months, you should know this industry inside and out. So this is your chance to go back and make it more specific based off of your improved understanding. So, if you're getting a bit confused as to what goes with what, here is a matrix example for you to follow. So, the company needs to follow strengths and weaknesses, and there's positive and negative. So, the company's strength is their workforce, is their pay incentive program, because. Now, if you want to use an event, like they hold this event every year, you need to be careful with that because you can mention it, but it really needs to emphasize why it's important. And the same goes for weaknesses too. So then we shift gears to industry. So opportunities and threats. These need to be industry related, not mentioning the company, and relating back to positive and negative aspects. So here is an example. So this is not a company you're doing at the moment, but this is a good example as to how you can get some practice. If you're feeling a bit uncomfortable with the SWOT analysis process, you can always just pick a company you know and try and practice organizing your thoughts, because it does take a bit of practice to remember, okay, strengths and weaknesses are company specific. Opportunities and threats are industry specific, and it takes a while to train your brain. So that is totally fine if you need to take some extra practice. So let's do this example together. So again, it's better to have 3 strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but just for the sake of time, I just picked 1 for each of them. So a strength for Zara would be close regional manufacturing. Now, Zara has been applauded for its manufacturing process because they're operated very close to home. It's a Spanish company and they make their products in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco pretty much by and large. So this results in a very short time it takes to get from finished manufacturing to get to shelves because of the close proximity. So if you want to state this as a strength, you could say a strength of Zara is that its regional manufacturing has resulted in a quick time for products to get to shelves. And this has resulted in beating their competitors for getting their latest fashions for each season, for example. So keeping it specific and keeping it company oriented. And you'll do the same for weaknesses, except taking the aspects that have a more negative spin. So a weakness, you could say, is based off the success of their manufacturing model, it has the risk of being replicated by many copycats who wish to model this same process, making their competitors more closely aligned with their company's goals and making it difficult to stand out amongst these competitors. So you can mention the industry itself under weaknesses, but you have to make sure it talks about the negative effect on the company itself. Now, opportunities. So, promotes cost-saving measures. So, I chose this example because the fashion industry is very competitive. So, any company that promotes cost-saving measures in a creative fashion has the opportunity to be a standout, to be a leader, to be a market leader, per se, within the industry. So, this alludes to Zara without directly mentioning it. Because, as I said, opportunities and threats should not directly mention the company. But you can allude to it in this part. So when you say opportunities, and we've already stated that they have cost-saving measures in the form of their manufacturing, you're giving an allusion to Zara without mentioning it. You're promoting, hey, we kind of fit within these opportunities, but you're not mentioning it. You're keeping it clear and concise, differentiating between company and industry. So then when we get to threats, you could say the market is highly saturated and it's very difficult to enter the market unless you operate within specific cost-saving measures. So what can be phrased as an opportunity could also be phrased as more of a threat, depending on how you spin it and depending on the direction you want to go. So this is your chance for additional practice. So I listed a couple of companies here. For example, Vans, card stores, Lego, Echo shoes, if you guys are looking for more additional practice for these. But I basically chose these based on their very unique characteristics. You could do this for any of them. Just if you feel the need to get more comfortable with this process. Because the SWOT analysis is your foundation. It was your way of getting oriented with the company and the industry. And it's important that this continues to evolve as your project evolves. So your SWOT analysis will be part of your final deliverable, and it needs to be done in a way that is clear, concise. Now, you guys can phrase your SWOT analysis in a way that makes sense to you. If you need to write it out, devote different paragraphs to each, that's fine. If you want to put it in a table format and do bullet points, that's great. Just make sure you give those added details of explaining why. Sometimes when we go into bullet point format or table format, we start making shortcuts, and that's detrimental to the reader who's trying to understand, okay, so you said this is a strength of your company. I don't really know this company, so why? Because this information, that even though this will be given to your employer and they'll have an understanding in their own mind of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, this information will be shared with other partners that they're working with. And I found from my own experience, sometimes the company owners might be a bit out of the loop as to regards with their own strengths and weaknesses, because you're providing a fresh outside opinion, and this is a good chance for them to maybe reevaluate. Oh, this is considered a strength. We hadn't looked at this alternative before. So keeping this clear and concise is important, and it's a chance for you to draw back on information later. You could, with your legal component, you could go back to your SWOT analysis and say, within this industry, you have to get this certification. And it can take up to 4 years unless you use this channel. So based off of this industry threat, it's best, we find that this company has this way of meeting these needs in a shorter amount of time. However you want to phrase it, you can always go back and pull and relate to other sections. And I've noticed that based off of submissions, I've seen that there have been opportunities to draw back on other parts, whether it's the SWOT with the legal, or maybe legal and pricing, HR and pricing. These should have an overlapping effect, because at the end of the day, these components are not treated independently. They all have interrelational aspects to them. So don't be afraid to mix and match the information when it's appropriate. Just making sure that as long as it's clearly laid out and explained and the correlations are given appropriately. So this is the part, so we have reached the end of the PowerPoint presentation, and it's important that the importance of the SWOT analysis is left with you guys, because the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are your chance to explain your direction, your strategy, as part of your final deliverable. So communicating to the company that you have this strength, this is how you can use it. You have this weakness, so this is what you need to change in order to fix it. This industry presents this opportunity. This is how you can change your company to follow this opportunity. The industry has this threat. This is how you can mitigate it. These points need to be communicated throughout your paper after communicating these points in your SWOT analysis. So it's your launching point to completing a well-rounded and thorough detailed explanation. Just making sure that your SWOT analysis is clearly organized between strengths and weaknesses being company related, mentioning the company itself in particular, and opportunities and threats, mentioning only the industry. No mention of the company, just the industry itself. And you can mention these relationships, how these strengths can be applied to opportunities. That is for mentioning throughout your paper. So, or if you want, if you need to structure your paper, you could even, after your SWOT analysis, you could write a little blurb below it. If you want to, say, make a table of your SWOT analysis, and you can write a little summary below. And it could say, as will be explained throughout the paper, this opportunity can be exploited through this. This threat can be mitigated through this. You can write a little summary at the bottom of it, because now that you have completed most parts of your project, you're in a position to do this, and you're organizing how your final deliverable is going to look. So that now that you've done this, you're able to put that little summary in if that's what you so choose. But you don't have to. You can just indirectly use it throughout your deliverable. So with that note, I leave you guys. So I hope you found this enlightening, useful, and applicable, because when you're in either a job in the future or the cross-culture group selects you and your project is the winner, this is your chance to really exploit your knowledge of the company and industry itself. And this is a chance for you to get practice using these models, because they will come into effect later. Even if you're working at a company and you're very familiar with the industry, this is your way to do a refresher for yourself, because things are going to change. Companies change, industries change. It's a good checkpoint for yourself to reevaluate how you stand and how you think your company stands within an industry. So these are good ways to periodically check. So I leave you guys with these thoughts, and all the best of luck on your cross-culture projects.